It's Monday, time for the Live at 5 Drive. Tune in and turn on to the Good Health Lawyer Radio Hour. I'm your host, Patty Finn. The call in number is 845 429 1700. Join me here live every Monday, WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. Rocking your health and rocking the law. Let's get started with the show.
Hey, everybody. I'm Patty Finn, the Good Health Lawyer, and you're listening to WRCR Radio 1700 AM, and this is the Live at 5 Drive. And I am just digging the Who. I don't know. I've never get tired of hearing that song, but I realized that NCIS, the television show, stole my intro. So don't listen to that show if you are. That was my idea first. Anyway, we're back on the air live, and I want to just start by thanking everybody who's been rallying around us and rallying the troops. I've never seen such enormous momentum as I have in the last couple of weeks, and I've mentioned many times, I'm kind of old school. I've been doing this a while along with Bernadette. And now we've got a lot of really remarkable people involved that are helping us, and two of them are our guests tonight. And before I introduce them, let me turn to my lovely host, Bernadette Pager, my co host. She's the brains of the operation. That's what I tell everybody. Bernadette, why don't you give a big shout out and tell everybody who you are, where you are in beautiful Tennessee,
Yeah.
and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Patty. It's such an honor to work with you. No, she's the brains. I'm just the dedicated warrior mom that does a lot of research. I'm also public policy director of Informed Choice Washington in Washington State, a host of an Informed Life radio that airs every Friday from 3 to 5 Pacific, 6 to 8 Eastern time. I'm now physically located in the beautiful free state of Tennessee. And I'm now active with some groups here. I'm really eager to get involved with all the wonderful people here. And yeah, like you said in the beginning, the number of people joining is so exciting, Patty. It's happening. I really feel like we are in this healing crisis for freedom across the globe. A lot of things had crept in over the past couple of decades, and then of course it snowballed recently, that we're chipping away at human freedoms and human rights and co-opting things, especially our health. And it didn't need to happen this quickly and abruptly and ridiculously, but so be it. They called it. And here we are.
And yeah, here we are. And tell us about your radio show.
Yeah, well, on the show for 2 hours, we bring on a lot like what you do, Patty, on this show. Bring on doctors and scientists and activists and attorneys and people injured by vaccines, people who know about alternative treatments, early treatment protocols. We just kind of cover the full gamut. We're really about showing how to live an informed life. And to live an informed life and give informed consent, you need information. And that's what's seriously lacking, because mainstream legacy media right now, all they do is grab information off the newswire. They grab the press releases by our state and federal agencies and they read them. So they're basically the news outlets or commercials for whoever, because nobody vets anything anymore. Only you and I and independent people are vetting anything.
No, I'm making it all up as I go along.
Yeah.
I decided that
No,
we stick.
yeah.
I can't do that. I've sworn an oath
Yeah.
under the court. But yeah, there is a lot of baloney out there, and it's revolting to
Mhm.
watch. I mean, with all due respect to the president, I can't even look at him. I feel like somebody should call Adult Protective Services
Yes.
and usher him away, because it's just unbelievably sad to watch him degenerate like that in the public. And he's gotten worse since he was vaccinated. Did anybody notice that? I did.
Yes.
You did, right? Well, anyway, then let me turn to my very observant guest there in the upper left quadrant of our screen, and that is Debbie Ulrich. She is a mom of twin boys, a wife, and a former massage therapist of 20 years. Debbie was asked to start New York Stands Up. That is a part of Make America Free Again. I am general counsel for New York to make America free again. And Debbie's involved with the White Plains. You're in the White Plains area and that chapter. And in the lower left quadrant, we have attorney Bobby Ann Flower Cox, which is really a beautiful name, I might add. And not only is her name beautiful, but so is her brain and her heart. And she is an attorney licensed to practice in New York State, 25 years. I can't believe that since you look 25. And she also has a radio show. Could you imagine the three of us have radio shows? What does that tell you? I'll tell you what it says. We can't get on Fox News anymore. That's what it says. Years ago, I was in the news a lot because, I'm close to the studio. I could be there in 15 minutes, and now they don't want to hear from us anymore. But anyway, I didn't really like their shows. I like ours better. But anyway, Bobby Ann has been really instrumental and quite a powerhouse in organizing people here downstate in Westchester and Rockland County. And I'm going to let them each tell you what they're doing and what their goals are. But I don't know, Bobby, maybe you're the one that's stimulating these people. And I know that Make America Free Again, New York, has been tremendous organizing people and bringing everybody together. So let me start with you, Bobby. Tell us what's going on, what you're focusing on, how people can get involved, and then we're going to get to the boots on the ground with Debbie. So why don't you start, Bobby? Ann.
Yes, yes. Thanks for having me on, Patty. So great to be here. Um, so basically, we've seen over the past year and a half, a lot of parents, a lot of New Yorkers standing up, pushing back against what they're seeing going on, which people feel are infringements on their rights. Their freedoms of speech, their freedoms to decide where they send their children to school, whether or not they wear a mask, whether or not they're subjected to the COVID-19 shot, all these different things. So a lot of parents, a lot of New Yorkers have stood up, started forming these smaller groups. And here in Westchester, there are many groups. A lot of them are based upon where you live, a town-wide group or a school district-wide group. And I was really thinking, the best way, because everybody wants to effectuate change, and everybody seems to want the same change. We want our freedoms back, right? So I think the fundamental way to get to that goal is to bring all of these smaller groups together and form a county-wide coalition where the voice is stronger and the voice is more powerful. It really is a numbers game with any sort of a grassroots organization. So I started to do that. I teamed up with a couple of local groups, and we last week we had our first open meeting to whoever wanted to come and become a part of the group. And it was a really great turnout. You were there, Patty. You were there speaking. It was really a terrific night of information and answering questions and organizing so that we could become a coalition, become a voice. And nobody's giving up their local groups. It's very important that those local groups stay local groups, because in that way they can still fight the fight that they need to do for their community locally. But we do need a county-wide coalition, which now we're working to become statewide with other counties. So I've been doing a lot of communicating, conference calls, Zoom calls with freedom leaders, I call them, in New York City and Long Island, and now Putnam, and then Dutchess. So it's becoming a statewide issue and a statewide coalition, which again I think is the key to really telling these politicians this is not what we want. Just because it's
Yes.
on mainstream media doesn't mean that's what the people want.
Funny enough, Rob Astorino called me a couple hours ago, and he's your former county executive and now running for governor. And he wanted me to let everybody know that he is opposed to mandates. And one of the things that I talked about when we gathered last week in Armonk was you really need to know what your politicians are thinking, and you've got to hold them to the fire. I mean, we've got to get rid of Dinowitz. We've got to get rid of Hoylman. They are absolutely driving these mandates in New York State. And Bobby, it was a very slim margin that we lost the religious exemption. It was one vote. And I think it was Assemblyman Skoufis jumped sides. So it was 13-13, and then they conferenced, and he changed his vote. So it was in a runaway train. And then I would also add, for those of you from Rockland, that our local assemblyman, Michael Lawler, he also wrote me this morning, and he told me he's absolutely opposed to Dinowitz's bill. And if any of you don't know who Dinowitz is, he's the assemblyman who likes to give parents the finger. And he's done that. Can you believe that, Bernadette? The guy, like, at a meeting, a government meeting, flipped off. I mean, I can't even tell you what he did. I had a picture. If I can find it, I'll slap it up there. But it was
Dr. Offit must be his role model, huh?
Oh yeah, what did Dr. Offit say? He said something to me at NYU, I think. Told me to F off or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
something
and
vulgar.
he flipped off Josh Coleman.
Oh, yeah.
When the Vax bus was there. Yeah.
That was funny. Well, good. We're getting to him. But anyway, I don't want to delay. I want to introduce my next lovely guest in the upper left quadrant there, Debbie Ulrich. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the good work that MAFA is doing. Everybody knows about MAFA who watches our show, but your boots on the ground here in New York. So tell us what's up.
Right. Well, I retired from work and I needed something to do. And
good.
I was like, volunteer, because I'm used to being busy. So I met Amy Arnell through my chiropractor, Mark Arnell, her husband. And she told me about this group. And I was hesitant because I'm not a public speaking person that's great at that anyway. But here I am anyway. And she said, would you like to start a group? And I said yes, because I am also concerned about our rights. And I believe that we should have body autonomy. And I just felt like something was up with these vaccines from probably a couple months in. I was fearful like everyone else. I was using Clorox, doing all this stuff, saying, oh my God, what's going on? And then I was like, something doesn't make sense. And I just started doing all this research, like for the past year. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, you've been lied to. You've totally been lied to. But you make a good point. Not everybody is a trial attorney, a newscaster, and your contribution is so important, because think of all the people you've spoken to, thousands probably, right? Since you've taken over the job, and you've done, I think, a great job. And Amy Arnell is wonderful. You all are, and we're moms. I mean, I did talk about some of the history behind my work, but I mentioned the other night, I was alone for a long time. I mean, Bernadette and I have been together a few years now, but there were very few opportunities for us to really organize. And unfortunately, there was a lot of polarity in many of the organizations, and it led to friction and competition and things like that. But for me as a lawyer, I represent one plaintiff, and if I win for them, I win for everybody. But you and Bobby Ann are undertaking some different things. You know, you're trying to coordinate these groups. So I give you a lot of credit, Deb, for what you're doing, and keep at it. You know, it never gets easy. When you agree, Bobby Ann, it doesn't get easy. It's as hard for me as it is anybody else. Wouldn't you agree?
It is. It's so hard because everybody has their day job, as I call it. And for the most part of the people that I've been dealing with, talking to, getting to know, who are part of other groups in other counties, everybody's doing this volunteer. So it's 24/7, and it really is important that you you make sure that you're dealing with people that have the same goal, because it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of time. And you're right, there are different personalities, but in the end, my main goal is we draft the legislation that we want passed in New York State, and we present it to the legislature, and we say, this is what we want. And other states have done what we're looking for. We want our rights back. Very few states have gotten rid of the religious exemption for vaccines. First Amendment gives us the right to practice our religions freely. If people think back to how our country actually got founded and was started, it was because people were fleeing religious persecution in Europe, and they didn't want to live under a government that was going to persecute them for what they believed. So, we can't go back to that now. We have to move forward and uphold our rights. And it's not anything new. When we revolted, when the founding fathers revolted against Great Britain, it was really obvious what they were doing. They wanted to stop what they considered tyranny. They were they were subjects to a king that lived nowhere near them and was imposing rules, edicts, laws, if you will, on them, taxing them. They had no representation in the parliament, and they had no, or not the parliament, but whatever the form of government was at the time, and today's parliament. And they were just feeling like, no one's listening to us. This is not what we want. These edicts, these rules, these laws, they're not helping us. They're actually hurting us. And so they finally stood up and said, enough, enough. We're starting our own country. This is ridiculous. So, I think history is repeating itself with people saying, wait a minute, who gave you the power to be a king in, whether it's New York State, or it's, New Jersey, or it's Iowa, or wherever it is? We don't have kings, right? We have three branches of government, which I think a lot of people have lost sight of that fact. And I know you've spoken about that too, Patty. As far as legal arguments, there's separation of powers in our country for a reason. It's checks and it's balances, and I think that has gotten a little bit out of hand, and we need to rein that back in. And only the people are going to do it. Only the citizens are going to do it. No government in the history of mankind has ever taken power from the people and then just voluntarily handed it back to the people.
Yeah,
You
buddy.
have to ask for it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very scary time right now. Bernadette, you've written legislation, haven't you? And
Yeah.
do you have any tips for us here in New York?
Well, kind of like we said before the show started, I do recommend looking to see what other people have already successfully done, as your base. In Washington State, where I have written legislation, I don't know how it's set up in other states, but they actually have at your disposal. You find a representative or a senator to prime it, and then they can turn it over to an agency right there at the Capitol that will put it in the proper language for the bills, how they should read for our state, and that's very helpful. I don't know if your states do that as well. So
I
I
don't
would give it
know.
as
Do they, Bobby?
That I don't know. When any legislation or proposed legislation that I've drafted in the past was not for New York State. The law firm that I worked for prior to opening my own practice represented states, other states, Puerto Rico even. And so those legislative initiatives were never New York based. So I have to look into that. That's a great point, Bernadette.
That's a great point.
yeah,
What else,
it's
Bernadette? Go on.
well, it's very helpful if you're able to get that assistance, and they also look to see where in the law that already exists where your new bill would fit, and they then weave it into that, and then you can see the implications if you've got a really good drafter in the office, where else in the law changes would be made because of this new law should it pass. And then, of course, if you do have somebody like that to assist you, try to be in the loop every step of the way, because sometimes you'll get, they don't quite interpret, especially if there's science involved. They don't quite understand what you're doing. They might not get the language correctly. So if you just make sure that you get to see everything before the bill actually drops, that's very helpful too. Um, but yeah, and like I think I mentioned earlier, when you have your model language and the bill that you put forward, if other states have already passed something similar, it's really helpful because the legislators feel much more comfortable being able to go to their caucus and those they stand with and say, listen, 3 other states already have this, and it just makes them feel more confident about it.
Yeah, in New York.
Hi, Patricia.
Yes.
I have a phone call from William Trebbing. He has a question for you.
Okay. All right. We'll take it. Hey, William. I'm Patty Finn, the Good Health Lawyer, and you're calling WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. You have a very talented panel here. How can we help you?
Well, thank you so much for taking my phone call, and I've been a fan of yours for years.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm a chiropractor in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and I've written a book called Goodbye Germ Theory. I did 22 years ago. It's pretty popular, but that's not the point. I was just so happy to get your message today because I would like to start a pro se action against uh, some of the theaters in my town. I was just kicked out of a theater in Stamford last night for not having a vaccine card, and want to know what you thought about all of that.
Well, that's right up my alley. And I know Bobby Ann's coordinating with the group in Connecticut. And there is a lawyer, and we were going to go after, I believe it was mask mandates, was one of the things we're starting. And I am, as we speak, filing an action in Brooklyn to challenge the governor's passport. And of course, the outcome of that, although it would only be binding in New York, it would certainly create a model where you would be able to take that and export it. And, one of the things about our group and the group that we gathered here, I mean, I don't think any of us are experts. I mean, as lawyers, we're not even allowed to hold ourselves out as experts. But
Exactly.
I think that they can't stop our momentum. There's too many intelligent, dedicated people that are gathering together, and our voices are stronger. So if you are interested in that case, I can work with you through MAFA, Make America Free Again, and then I will help coordinate the case. Whether I could take it or not, I could certainly advise on what's going on in your state. So, anyway, tell us the name of your book.
Sure. I'd love to have your help. I've wanted to do this for a period of time. I mean, it's essentially the only areas in Fairfield County, Connecticut, that are hinting on vaccine passports are the theaters right now. And actually, they're not hinting; they're just not letting me in unless you're vaccinated. They're very bold about that. And they always say, "Well, our board voted, and we're private, so we can do it." And I'm
No.
standing there at the Avon Theater last night and said, "Well, this is discrimination, just like it was back in the '60s when you didn't let a black person or a Jew into your country club." Of
Yeah.
course, I'm holding up the line, but I didn't. Yeah, I faced it. So it was kind of a drawing line for me. I wanted to. I've done pro se cases in the past, but uh, if there is a momentum of other people doing this, and I know that you've been doing this for a while, I would much rather jump in on the bandwagon and
Yeah.
be part of a community rather than just be like Han Solo.
That's very important that we try to coordinate our efforts, and unfortunately in the legal community there's been a little bit of competition, new people on the scene, kind of I think it's better if we coordinate, and hence that's why we're on the show tonight, because we're trying to encourage coordination. And of course, MAFA has a New York and a Connecticut chapter. And what I would recommend is that you email me. Anybody out there can reach me at patriciafinnattorney.com. And my information is there. And if you email me, I will definitely put you in touch with the Connecticut people. And we need plaintiffs, we need funding. We know the law. We know the law. It's really a question of plaintiffs and funding. So if you can help, that would be Jim Dandy. All right.
So it's
Don't know if we have a chapter in Connecticut, and we would love to start one there.
Well,
From what I know,
maybe we got one now.
yeah,
well, if I do this pro se, I guess I am your chapter. So
yes,
Well, I
that
think
would be
I
awesome.
think it's pretty easy to get at our club. We're definitely inclusive. So, quite frankly, anybody with a pulse will take what?
is this Patty talking?
Yeah, it's Patty.
Like, I'm looking on your advertisement here that I got in an email, and I don't. Let's see. I guess so. You said it's Patricia Finn
Patricia Finn Attorney at gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
Right.
All right, I'll send you an email and uh, all right, sure. Let's see what we can coordinate.
I'd be very happy to. I mean, I know that my guests are very involved in Connecticut. I mean, that's part of what we met earlier this week. It was a group out of Greenwich. So,
Oh,
you
it's
know,
the British Patriots. Yeah, I belong to that group.
oh,
Yeah.
good, good, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Let's get them, and we
Well,
can certainly organize.
I'm planning on doing this one specific thing, and just about, because I'm an actor as well, and I've done a lot of community theater, but I'm just really annoyed at the theaters that I used to perform in. Now, holding this up and saying, yeah, well, nobody's acting here or coming here unless you have masks. Well, the masks I'm not even going to fight. That's just stupidity. But it's the not letting you in without the toxic shots that I'm just really going to make a stand against. I could use help with just being pointed in the right direction for like how to start a federal complaint and things like that in regards to this. I can probably figure it out myself, but
No, I wouldn't recommend you do that, because if you make a mistake, with all due respect, it could backfire on everybody else. There's enough
right.
legal talent available to bring you in. No, I wouldn't do it pro se. And quite frankly, the masks are not. They are very important, and they're easier than going after a vaccine. And you can still establish your same rights to avoid a mask that would apply to a vaccine. So I say masks and passports are the low hanging fruit, and we should start there, because vaccines are just so incredibly complicated. No fault liability, the Vaccine Act, countermeasure. If you're injured by a vaccine, COVID vaccine, you're basically out of luck. you're not getting
Well,
any
is there a
damages.
constitutional basis to start on with this, or do you not start there with a complaint, or is it more you're just going with what you just mentioned?
I would, I would say your constitutional arguments are pretty slim. You have to
Mm.
come up with a statutory basis, and I mean, let me just state this: you have no First Amendment right to refuse a vaccine, whether you even have a bodily autonomy. Ninth Amendment right is questionable. And so you have to, if you are going to bring those arguments, you have to be very careful about how they're brought. So why
Okay.
don't you give me an email and I'll help you if I can.
All right. So we'll communicate that way. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. And thanks for calling.
That's
Hey,
my pleasure.
Patty.
Yeah.
Patty, you asked him the name of his book, and didn't he say something like the death of germ theory? Was it? Is that what I heard?
I'm sorry.
My book is called Goodbye Germ Theory. Yes, it's popular. It's a bestseller on Amazon. It's been out for 22 years.
Goodbye germ theory. Fantastic. I'm going to look for it because you know what's going on right now as these vaccines are being used as a tool to steal our freedom is the death throes of the pharmaceutical industry co-opting our health. They know that people are figuring out that skewing your immune system with their products is not the way to go. We figured out years ago once we learned about the biome and so much
Dr.
about
Beck
what
knows the
builds real
word.
health.
Yeah, right.
And now they
Oh, of
don't want to
course.
give it up. They want to make natural immunity and real health almost illegal to achieve. But it
Well,
ain't going to happen.
and illegal to speak about. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been doing this work. I've been doing this work for 40 years. I mean, honestly, and I've been lecturing around the country with it. And the back of my book, the last chapter of my book, actually has a legal section that I put out. I mean, you'll find it interesting. Just Google. If you
Well,
Google
we will
Goodbye Germ
bring you on
Theory.
the show. We'll
Yeah.
we'll
Well, I'd
bring
love
you
to
on
be on.
the
Yeah,
show.
I do radio shows all the time.
Oh,
So I'd love to
good.
be on. Yeah, just I'll give you all that contact information when I email you. But the thing that I talked about these legalities, years ago from a constitutional basis. But I'm not a lawyer, and I make that very clear in the book. And I just I've always had lawyers help me when I want to go the full course with this. But the bottom line right now is that they are trying to make natural health illegal, and even speaking about natural health illegal. And it's what I say to everyone is that this is fascism at its highest degree because the pharmaceutical industry has bought the government, and essentially they are acting like they are your government. The other ones, all the politicians are working for them. So
Not
you have
anymore. We're going to fix that.
Yeah.
Patty, if I could just jump in for a second.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to comment.
One thing that you brought up in this conversation is, I think, important for everyone to understand because I'm getting so many questions about this. As you know, I'm sure on Saturday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals held that they're going to pause Biden's COVID-19 shot mandate for the private companies that have 100 or more employees. So that first I had to explain to people that the pause means that it's not going to go into effect until the court can hear the arguments from the lawyers on both sides and then make a decision in the case. But what the pause means is if there is a ruling in favor of the states that are challenging the mandate, then it's not binding law on everybody across the country because people were saying, well, what about us here in New York? If the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals rules in favor of the states instead of in favor of Biden's mandate, what does that mean for New York? It's not an automatic everybody has to listen to what the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says. But it is really good precedence, although not binding, for all the other circuits to say the same thing. And if they don't, then that would typically be something that the Supreme Court would take up. If you have different circuits across the country ruling differently on the same exact issue, it a lot of times will prompt the Supreme Court to take up that matter so that they can say once and for all what that should be.
Right, and that's exactly what I thought because last week the Second Circuit turned us down. So now we have the split. I That is good. And not only that, that paragraph decision they said the mandate presented grave constitutional issues. That's pretty strong language. And the Second Circuit, where we are in New York, not so much. They have not really favored us, and so you're 100% on point. That split couldn't have come at a better time because we, the Patriots, and Thomas More, they are all heading to the Supreme Court. So I think all those cases are going to coalesce, and that will be very, very good. And I know.
I'm gonna check out here. I'll talk.
Oh, okay. And thanks. Yeah, send me the email. I think that you want to hear my wager. What's going to happen is the Supreme Court's going to take the case, and they're going to come back and they're going to say mandates are lawful. Okay, don't kill me because there's more. They're going to say, the state can mandate it. That's what they said in Jacobson. That's what the Supreme Court said last year in Roman Catholic. They said if we had Jacobson today, we would probably rule the same way. But what they are going to do is they're going to come back with a religious exemption, a medical exemption, and natural immunity exemptions. And those three exemptions are everybody. You would and they will loosen the grip on people, enabling them to get these exemptions, and I believe that's what's going to happen. What do you think? Yeah.
Patty, do you think that they won't make any consideration at all on the product itself, on the science of the product? Are they just going to rule on the category of vaccine without regard to the product? That's what I find so concerning about like the original Jacobson decision is they said, well, we might be wrong. This vaccine, when you talk about smallpox, might not work that great. People might be harmed by it, but we just follow the consensus. We can't rule on the science. We're just going to rule on the law. And I think that needs to be changed. I think that if we're going to change and again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just looking at it, with kind of, a basic layman's eye on things is that, until they actually look at the products to see what is going on there, to see that the consensus in pushing these mandates are not even able to achieve their stated goal, we've got to get it so that the courts don't allow the bullying that happens with the semantics of language, right? Because they're treating vaccines like a religion instead of individual pharmaceutical products. You cannot treat vaccination as one thing. It's different for all the vaccines that exist. It would be like if you went to court and like, let's say they were mandating painkillers. And they decided, yeah, it's legal to mandate painkiller, and that would include opioids, aspirin, right? Really dangerous things and really safe things to treat the entire category of vaccination, as something that you can mandate separate from the product. That makes zero sense to me.
Well, that is a big problem. And Brusovitz v. Wyeth basically shut the door. It's no fault liability. If you're injured by a vaccine, you don't get discovery. You have to go to vaccine court. And then I actually won a very big case that I'll be announcing publicly next week. It was remarkable. But you have no liability. If you are injured by a COVID vaccine, it is a countermeasure. It's covered under the PrEP Act, and you get nothing. You can make a countermeasure compensation application to Health and Human Services, but they don't fund anybody. If you're injured by a childhood vaccine, you go to vaccine court. There is a lot of a struggle there to get compensation. But just, I want to get back to our guest, but I will tell you that the problem with that is, can you get them? Yeah, you can go through an administrative procedure with FDA, and you petition FDA, but it could take years before you get an answer. So our goal right now is choice, and then the science. I'd say it's going to be 5, 6 years before anybody really gets in a courtroom on the science. Look how long Dr. Wakefield has been waiting for information on the MMR. He filed an Administrative Procedure Act, and the FDA didn't even answer them yet, I don't think. So, there's a lot of bureaucracy there. The legislature needs to be changed, which, Bobby Ann, is my next point. I think one of the things you might also want to consider after you're done in New York is legislation to either repeal or modify the Vaccine Act. And we should talk about that. The Vaccine Act,
Absolutely.
if you want to get vaccinated, and it worked in theory, it's actually a good law. It's been upheld. But I think you should have a choice that you can go through vaccine court or you can sue directly and without waiting that administrative period.
Yeah, with the no liability for the manufacturers, I think that's an area that needs to be reexamined because everybody else that manufactures something is held liable if they do it in a poor manner. To Bernadette's point, the Supreme Court is definitely, in my opinion, not going to rule on the science of anything, because they don't typically do that. And Jacobson versus Massachusetts from 1905 is what everybody is looking to for, is a vaccine mandate legal? Technically what that case held was that the fine was legal.
That's right.
It was either you get the smallpox vaccine, and this was all local. People think because it was the United States Supreme Court that it was a federal law and a federal mandate. It wasn't. This was specific to Massachusetts, where they were having a smallpox outbreak at the time. And so the local law said that Jacobson had to get the smallpox vaccine or pay a $5 fine. So what the court really held is that, yes, that's a legal statute. You can tell somebody you have to pay a fine if you don't want to get this smallpox vaccine in the middle of an outbreak. But what Jacobson really is important that people understand is that, number one, that wasn't a federal mandate. It wasn't a federal law. And number two, Jacobson, the Supreme Court says you have to look to your state law.
That's right.
You have to look to your local law to see what it says, and then we can determine if that is constitutional or not. So in New York, to bring it, back to local, in New York, currently there isn't a law that says you have to mask your children in school, or you have to give your child the COVID-19 shot or whatever. That's not law, because the legislature hasn't passed it yet. And it goes back to that separation of powers I mentioned earlier. Just because the governor says you have to do something doesn't make it a law, because the laws are passed by the legislature.
Here. Excellent, excellent. You nailed it. You nailed Jacobson perfectly. Perfectly. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I mean, it got you short.
No,
I got so excited, though. Everybody, I'm so right. I'm reading Supreme Court sheets in the middle of the night. This is the life that I lead. But I agree with you. But I like Jacobson. I think it's a good case. And I know a lot of recent lawsuits are arguing Jacobson is no good, it's old, it's outdated. But your point's well taken. You know, it was upholding a penalty, and but the good parts about Jacobson that everybody overlooks is that one, it is a state law issue, and two, you have to have an epidemic that imperils society in order to mandate a vaccine. They have to be necessary, harm avoidant, proportional, non discriminatory, and fair. And these vaccines are none of those things. And
Mm-hmm.
you can actually use Jacobson. But Bernadette always talks about her trouble with where the court said, look, it's the consensus. The legislature thinks it's good, and we're going with that. And that's still the way the court is
Yeah.
looking at it today. But we have the Vaccine Act now. 1986 changed everything.
It did. And where is the consumer protection? Again, you cannot treat a category of pharmaceutical product as if, I mean, just that without looking at the actual products that people have to choose to comply with the outcome of the ruling or whatever. And so, moving forward, I would love to see, we've got to get consumer protection again, for products woven somehow into this. And the best way we do that is, I believe, COVID, the response to COVID, the government's corrupted response to COVID means we have got to remove anything having to do with vaccines from any government control. They are not trustworthy. They cannot be trusted with this at all. If you've got any part of taxpayer funded state dollars, federal dollars pushing a pharmaceutical product, you're going to end up with messes, court messes, freedom messes, everything. They have to go back to simply being pharmaceutical products on the shelf you can choose if you want. It should not be part of anything the government does. The government should give you clean water. It should tell you about how to stay healthy. It should give you maybe information on all of your options, but they should get the heck out of the doctoring business because they're no good at it and they can't be trusted.
And now throw this out. We're commoditizing water now. So I think about the ethical implications of that, that your water is being traded as a commodity. And it's just nothing but trouble. I mean, we need our freedom back. Debbie, how is MAFA going to be able to help everybody? What is it that somebody could expect from joining MAFA? Tell us how to join MAFA, how to donate. Donations are very important.
Yes.
People want to know, how to help. You can donate, and you can definitely volunteer. But if you're volunteering, you can't be a pain in the neck. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. You got to be careful not to reinvent the wheel here. And I mean, we love new ideas, but no
Right.
more, no rogue people. So tell us, Debbie, what do we do?
So you can go to makeamericans.freeagain.org and you can donate there. You
Okay.
can you can also go to newyorkstandsup.org and donate there. So the big plan for Pam Popper and MAFA is to hopefully get 80 million people in our database for a one issue voter on medical tyranny. That's the big plan. And we do that by starting local and growing it one person at a time. And I know, it takes time, and I've only been doing this for 3 months, but I'm so committed to the cause of this. And so that's what I'm doing. And Matha has a lot of resources. I mean, she helps people decide if they want to homeschool their children. Or there's resources to say, okay, if I don't know how to homeschool my children, how do I do that if you want to pull your kids out? She has resources for truck drivers. Now, I haven't looked at that yet, but these are people who are on the road who can't, always um, be available to volunteer. So she's doing things for them. She is also, she does a conference call on Monday nights at 9 o'clock for healthcare workers who have been fired from their jobs. And if they would like to start their own business, like she has done for the past, I think, 25, 30 years, she can help with that.
Yeah,
So,
Pam's a remarkable woman, and I'm honored to be general counsel here. We're suing Stony Brook Hospital. That's in the works. We're bringing action against Mayor De Blasio for the police department. Rocco will be filed later this evening. The mask mandate for MFV Como is getting on appeal in the appellate division. So we're super active, and anybody out there who wants to litigate should really maybe look at what's happening and see if you can fit in there somewhere. So, Bobby Ann, I want to give you the top of the hour here. Maybe you can direct anybody to your radio show where they can get in touch with you, how they can come under your rubric, and then we're going to get you in touch with Pam, I think. That's probably, I don't know, that would be like two superpowers colliding in the atmosphere.
agreed. Agreed.
Right? Would that be true? I mean, seriously, it just dawned on me. You two really need to be coordinating. Pam's a lot like you, very dedicated, very, very smart, and has a plan. So, what's your plan? Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, so I have my show is actually online, and my base is rumble.com because YouTube does not like me. So so it's rumble.com, and the name of my show is All Things Lawyer. And if you go on Rumble and you just search All Things Lawyer, you'll come up with my channel. And basically, anybody that's interested in getting involved with either Westchester County-wide coalition or getting involved with the statewide, New York statewide coalition, they can certainly email me. The way you can reach me is my email is allthingslawyer2020@gmail.com. And then if you reach out to me there, I can certainly get you in the right direction of signing up and getting involved. I said everybody has a talent. Everybody has something to bring to the table. If you're listening to this show and you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a scientist. Everybody has a talent. And if you don't know what it is, shoot me an email and I will help you.
And we'll figure it out for you. That is
Absolutely.
the truth. That is totally the truth. Anyway, we're at the top of the hour. They always go so quickly, our shows, and I'm going to have to bring our guests back, and there is so much more to talk about. But anyway, I'm going to have to say adieu for today. I'm Patty Finn, the Good Health Lawyer. You're listening to WRCR Radio, 1700 AM, and be sure to check us out next week. The show was brought to you by my law firm. We handle vaccine exemptions, vaccine injuries, and now vaccine mandates. Say a prayer for all of us, and a prayer for Rocco, and for MF, and for all the children that we represent. All right. Peace out. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, I killed my tooth. All right. Well, how was that?